Haven.
A great welcome to you, everyone, on this very special day to the intergenerational approach to peace building. This is a very significant subject, especially for our times, and we are so grateful that you are here joining us in this conversation. I'm turning it over now to Hezekiah, our remarkable Executive Director of Pathways to Peace, who will begin our program.
Thank you, Avon. This is Hezekiah Gabriel, as Avon said, and that was Avon Madison, who is the co-founder and president of Pathways to Peace. And we are so honored and privileged to have Avon as at the helm of our organization and continuing to do global peace building. So I think you're going to be in for a wonderful presentation today. So before we begin, I'm going to just go through a few logistics. We hope that you will mute yourself other than when you're speaking. And Katie is here. Katie, you can raise your hand. Katie is our amazing Zoom tech, and Katie is going to be putting the contact information of the presenters in the chat box. And in addition to that, we know that you are going to be having questions for our presenters, and we're actually giving you some questions to ponder as well. And so we'd like you to kind of put those questions in the chat or hang on to them until the end of our presentation. And we will be taking time at the end to address your questions from all of our speakers. So let's roll. Our presenters today, we have just this amazing lineup. As you've already heard from Avon, we have Mia Rodriguez, who is our 9th grade student and a Pathways to Peace Council member. We have Natasha, who is our South African youth organizer, and she also serves as Pathways to Peace on the planning team. Renor Janney, who is the UN youth representative for Pathways to Peace, and Marilyn King, 2-time Olympian in the 5-event pentathlon. And Marilyn has been with Pathways to Peace and working with us and honoring us with her presence for many, many, many years. So it's time before we begin our presentations to talk just a little bit about Pathways to Peace. And so Pathways to Peace, thanks to Avon Madison, we have 40 years of building peace through collaboration, innovation, and movement building. Avon, along with many other peace leaders, some of them are on this call today, inaugurated the International Day of Peace, which is celebrated around the globe on September 21st every year. The Culture of Peace Declaration and Program of Action, that's the UN International Day of Peace, the UN Culture of Peace Declaration and Program of Action, and many other peace building practices, including the Peace Wave, which is at noon in every time zone and is a tool for making peace day every day. And so we are actually, Avon's introducing the Peace Wave and conducting the Peace Wave every day this week until tomorrow, Friday, but will be on Thursday today too, in the May Peace Prevail on Earth room at 11:40 to 12:05. So you can have the experience, the collective experience of the Peace Wave if you come into the May Peace Prevail on Earth room. So before we begin, we always like to begin with a brief meditation because we think it's really, really important to open up both our hearts and our minds. And we know that if we can embrace, if we can embody, if we can be in peace consciousness, then peace will be on our earth. And so we'd like you to take just a moment, settle into your chairs, and just rest in the beauty of the breath. Just breathe a little bit more slowly and a little bit more deeply. And we'd like you to join with us and with each other, heart to heart, with open hearts and open minds, that we see the light of peace, that we embrace the light of peace, that we feel the light of peace coursing through our bodies. We see that light of peace in this large sacred circle, binding us together in love and nurturance and unity. And we see that light of peace washing over our planet, nurturing everything it touches with love, with unity, and with peace. Of course, always peace. And now we see that light of peace moving into our universe as we breathe in the beauty of all that is, and we breathe out peace. So bringing that light, that peace back into this sacred space as we begin our time today with open and expanded hearts and open minds. As the Eastern sages say, we lead with our heart and our mind follows. Thank you. Now take a deep breath as we settle in to our presentation. So we begin by bringing Avon Madison back with us, as Pathways to Peace has a long history of intergenerational work and intergenerational engagement from the very beginning. And so we've asked Avon to grace us with some thoughts about a Pathways to Peace perspective on intergenerational peace building. Avon?
Thank you, Tezakaya, for that beautiful moment of silence, moment of peace. And linking our hearts across distance in our sacred circle, we begin by honoring the fact that this is the 40th anniversary of the declaration and the resolution that established the International Day of Peace at the United Nations. And to begin, I'm going to quote from that resolution in 1981. On this day, we mark our individual and collective progress toward building a culture of peace. And may this day serve as a reminder of our constant commitment to peace above all differences of any kind. And Peace Day is every day. And in this honoring of the 40th anniversary of the International Day of Peace, we are in that time of the countdown to that day. We are highlighting one of the most important aspects of peace building, which is an intergenerational approach. I will begin by saying that when Pathways to Peace first became a more formal organization, the first person that was elected, we don't call it a board of directors, it's a council of directors. The first person that was nominated and elected was a young person of 10 years old. We began with an intergenerational council, and we continue that today. The intergenerational approach is extremely important. It was then, 40 years ago, and is ever more important now. One aspect of the difference in generations is what they offer to one another. The elders who were qualified in terms of consciousness and experience and know how to listen is to offer some wisdom and experience to the younger generation. For the younger generation of children and youth, come with a spark of enthusiasm, idealism, and questioning so that it opens up the aperture for thinking in new ways with fresh insights and spontaneous creativity. And for the middle generation, it is to help to construct opportunities and programs and support systems that open doors and provide a vehicle for this co-creativity that comes from the wisdom of the older generation and the enthusiastic idealism from the younger generation, and begin to synthesize that into a sequencing that allows the visions and the ideas to become grounded in practical and very effective action. I will give an example of one of the activities in which Pathways to Peace was very engaged with the United Nations, with the creation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in the late 1980s. And I served on the UNICEF NGO, non-governmental organization, committee at that time. And I was, even though in my early 40s, I was still the youngest person on that committee. And I began bringing in young people at the committee meetings, thanks to the extraordinary head of UNICEF at that time, who was just so open to intergenerational approach. And in those committee meetings, the young people added a perspective and a wording that helped to shape some aspect of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it was a combination of this extraordinary wisdom coming forward, but also under the guidance and leadership of the head of UNICEF, who was open to all of that process. Because of the effect of our influence of the committee, Pathways to Peace was invited to sit with UNICEF at the 1990 Summit of Children, where the heads of state, the largest gathering of the heads of state during all those years, occurred during that summit. And I was allowed to bring in a couple of youth to sit in the UNICEF area as special guests. Subsequent to the establishment and the signing of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, Pathways to Peace inaugurated a caucus on the rights of the child. And we did this with an intergenerational approach. And the caucus meetings were so successful that it brought in representatives from different UN agencies. It brought in a diverse assortment of NGOs. And I chose as co-chairs an extraordinary woman who was with the United Nations from South America, and an 18-year-old youth from North America. And what was so significant was that it brought to life the convention, made it understandable, and we were able to build an implementation program for the first year of that convention. And the second aspect is that we were able to bring that link between the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and UN Convention on the Rights of the Child as principles and guidelines and practical actions that could be implemented in any program of the United Nations and in any conference of the United Nations. So this is an example of how an intergenerational approach can make an impact on a global level. And also, it is very important because with an intergenerational approach is something that can be applied in one's own community, in one's own business, in one's own school, in one's own family, to start those intergenerational conversations that can allow a greater communication, a sense of greater community, a kind of creativity that allows us to find our way forward. And in this time of this intersection of multiple crises that are affecting all of humanity and our beloved planet, the intergenerational approach is more important than ever before. Renor will be one of the people speaking to that, as well as Mia. But the aspect that the youth are bringing forward, the children and the youth at this time, is we're tired of hearing about that we're the promise of the future. We are being affected now, and we are not even being given the privilege of having a future. And we want to take action now, and we want to have your support, meaning the support of all the other generations. To this we commit. Thank you.
Thank you, Avon. That was wonderful. So perfect to lead us off. And so now we go to Mia Rodriguez. She is on our current Pathways to Peace Council of Directors, and she's a 9th grade student at Mater Dei Prep. But Mia is so much larger than that. So I turn it over to Mia. Mia, I'm so glad you're here.
Hello, everyone. As Hezekiah said, my name is Mia Rodriguez. And before we start, I would just like to give a little background on my experience with working across generations. Though I haven't been at Mater Dei Prep very long, with the amount of time I've attended high school here, I've come across numerous opportunities to work across generations. In the Global Leaders program offered at my school, my fellow classmates and I have worked together with Mr. George Anthony to give voices to those who've been silenced. This year in the Global Leaders program, we have made a film called Our Voices Matter, where we get the chance to dive into global issues that we need to shed awareness on. In addition, I'm a member of the Council of Directors here at Pathways to Peace, an organization dedicated to making peace a practical reality through both local and global projects. In the world we live in, the experiences we face have no age limit. There's no protection set in place to help in awful situations. So why silence those experiencing the same things as us? Whether they are young or old, that shouldn't invalidate the feelings that they have experienced. For example, for a topic like racism, it is almost a universal concept that all people of color, no matter the age, will face. The world will never stop and reach out its hands and cradle and soothe the voices screaming for help. That's why we must grant our aid. Our society is built upon mothers, daughters, sons, fathers, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and dreamers. We must protect those who dream, despite their color, race, gender, age, sexual orientation, etc. This is why it's important to include all ages to the table. To try and solve this problem, it can't be solved by one person. We need a collective of all types of people. The world has become too accustomed to the injustices and hatred of our communities, and I will no longer sit and watch fathers and daughters, people, die for fate or face extreme mistreatment solely based upon the color of their skin. My voice matters because I am a person. My age, color, and views on life don't and should not have an impact on that. My voice is just as important as everyone else in the room, and so is yours. In our fight against racism, we must always remember how deeply rooted it is in our society. That's evident in the fact that we are still referred to as the minority, a term that separates us from others. In this long battle, we must allow all profound thinkers to be heard and grant everyone the chance to share their voice. It is time to finally even the playing field. As a young Caribbean woman myself, just by existing, there are already cards stacked against me. But I refuse to be just another number in the grand scheme of things. I am not a demographic. My life isn't destined to become another tragedy. I'm a person, a girl who has hopes and dreams, a girl who has 4 dogs and 2 brothers, loving friends and family. So what makes me different from everyone else? Don't I want the same things as all others do? The chance to live. Together we can learn to rebuild and bridge diversity, inclusion, and equity. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you all, Mia. I have said to Mia, to the council, and to many others, every time Mia speaks, I feel tearful. You know, she moves me so much into that heart space. Mia, thank you so much for that call to action. We must respond. Next, we have Natasha Singhali. Be at peace with yourself and others. Natasha is a youth leader, and she serves on the Pathways to Peace strategic planning team. Natasha?
Good day, namaste, assalamu alaikum, sawubona. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm of mixed heritage, Khoisan, European, and Indian, in parts and measure that matter and do not matter. I'm the daughter of a Catholic mother and a Vedic Hindu father, and wife to a Sufi Muslim partner. I'm a mother on this African soil. Next, please. Growing up in apartheid South Africa meant, as a non-white person, I was diminished. We were segregated into zones based on color. Our choices and movements were restricted. I had to live as a person less deserving, not equal to others who had the right to the country's resources and facilities. I was considered by law not equal to others, not good enough, not special enough to be granted the right to vote. And because of the color of my skin, I couldn't participate in where our country or the world was going. I was curtailed by oppression. Yes, I was, but others whose skin tone was even darker, they had it much worse. Their ideas, their bodies, their spirit, their humanity were crushed by apartheid. But Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela changed all of that. Rolihlahla, interestingly, means to break the branch, to be a troublemaker, to stir things up. And as a young lion, that is exactly what Nelson Mandela did. But his intentions were always to strive for peace and unity. At the darkest of times and in unimaginable chaos, Nelson Mandela found a path of reconciliation. He fostered the opportunity for us to gaze and truly look at each other to find in ourselves and even the oppressor, the oneness that makes us bearers of the code of humanity, a code that reverberates in all of us, making it possible to be at peace with ourselves and each other. Today, I hold on to the warmth of Madiba's beaming smile, his wholehearted belief in reconciliation, and I have in my heart his unflinching audacity to hope. It is on the shoulders of this remarkable leader and other giants like him who walked in his time that I'm able to see ahead. I'm able to move forward to serve the next generation. I considered it a privilege to grow up in South Africa and to have a deep moving experience of attaining freedom in my generation. I feel compelled to play my role to compete, to keep those flames of peace burning in South Africa. And that's why I lead a youth mentoring program for underserved communities. So the program itself has both technical skills and what I call human living software. I designed the program to teach administration, governance, and project management skills. These skills are usually gleaned in a formal workspace, and as young school leavers, our matriculants would not have been exposed to it. The toolkit and the case studies developed, they are invaluable because it accelerates their learning on productivity, on goal setting, and just on sharpening their analytical skills. But the program, as I say, also includes human software. So we cover mindfulness, finding purpose, relationship building, value-based leadership, ethics, and of course, serving one's community. The program is designed to improve employability, and it offers introspection and expands the perspective youth have on their lives, which of course is critical at the age where they are making decisions. In short, we are helping young people orientate to being their best selves. I'm in awe when I receive feedback from them, when they come to understand that their personal energetic signature and how they can contribute to a peaceful society and change the world. Next, please. Ubuntu, it's an African philosophy. It has at its heart the meaning that I am because you are. Ubuntu reminds us to truly look at each other as shining spiritual beings. Our oneness means that my peace is inextricably tied to your peace. And this is our beautiful land, where we are at one with the spirit of this land and all its souls in South Africa. Next, I would like to very quickly pose a few reflective questions to you. I ask you to relax into your seats, give out a loud sigh if you need to, and feel at ease. I'll be asking 3 questions, and I will give you 10 seconds to reflect. Just observe what comes up for you. You may share it in the chat. You may close your eyes and possibly send a note to self if that's what you prefer. The first question I'd like you to reflect on is, when you listen to my personal account of South Africa's apartheid system, what did you think, or how did it make you feel? Next, when you were growing up, what words of encouragement would you have wanted to hear? And what advice would have made the world of difference to you to connect with your inner strength? To close my session, I want to thank you for participating in the exercise, and I will end with the Buddhist chant sending compassion into the world. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Peace be with you.
Natasha, thank you so much. You are such a gift. You're a gift to us here. You are a gift to Pathways to Peace. You are a gift to your country. You are a gift to the world. So we are so extremely grateful for you. And now it's my honor and privilege to introduce Renor Johnny. Renor has been with Pathways to Peace for a very long time, even though he's still quite young, as a youth representative to the UN from Pathways to Peace. And I want to say that Renor has really established his leadership in several areas, immigrant issues, and what we see as being so important today. Immigrant issues are as well, but advancing nuclear disarmament. And he's going to share some thoughts with us about how that issue and perhaps others are really best served through an intergenerational approach. Welcome, Renor.
So much, Hezekiah. I really appreciate it. It is an honor to be here with all of you and alongside fellow distinguished peace builders. My name is Renor Yani, and I am a Pathways to Peace representative to the United Nations. I primarily work on nuclear disarmament in the Balkan region and refugee migrant rights. I also serve as a committee member on the UN Department of Global Communications Youth Steering Committee. On July 7, 2017, at the UN, 122 states voted for the adoption of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. It opened for signature on September 20th, 2017. This historic treaty calls for states to carry out a complete ban on nuclear weapons as contained in Article 1 of the treaty. It also contains provisions for nuclear-armed states to accede. On January 22nd, 2021, the TPNW went into force after Honduras became the 50th country to ratify, and it officially became international law. So far, 86 countries have signed it and 54 have ratified. This is a major milestone, especially for civil society organizations and coalitions like Nobel Peace Prize winner ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, and other organizations that led the efforts to achieve this. Pathways to Peace is proud to be an official partner organization of the ICAN Coalition and is honored to join over 600 organizations that represent over 100 countries. We have been working closely together on raising the awareness of the TPNW amongst the general public and government of Albania. We are currently working with officials, local experts, and civil society organizations to build supportive momentum. On March 20th, 2021, Pathways to Peace and I led the efforts with co-sponsoring civil society organizations to hold a conference, Peace and Security in Albania. The purpose of this conference was to unify individuals from different sectors in support of European security, nuclear disarmament, and women, peace, and security. Included speakers were parliamentarians, the OSCE, Red Cross Albania, and civil society experts. We are also currently in the early stages of collecting data and statistics of the general public's support for the TPNW. As an Albanian peace builder, it is an honor for me to lead the efforts within PTP. However, an important element to our peace building progress is implementing an intergenerational approach. Here at PTP, this is something that has been a cornerstone of our work across the board. On September 28, 2020, in concert with the International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, I chaired a conference titled An Intergenerational Approach to Advancing the TPNW. The conference was an opportunity that served as a bridge to bring everyone together and allow for deeper conversation and collaboration to occur. We had a diverse set of age groups, nationalities, cultures, sectors, and perspectives contribute best practices to the larger conversation of how we can work together for a world free of nuclear weapons intergenerationally. 3 ways in which we can further advance our efforts in this way is 1, becoming informed and raising our awareness. When I first began this work, I knew no one and nothing about this field. However, I realized very quickly that I had to first become more informed and aware of the current and past discourse around nuclear disarmament, and in particular the TPNW. I knew that I had to learn how to speak the general lingo at the least to be effective and impactful in this work. From the very beginning and up until now, I have been learning, researching, critically thinking to become more knowledgeable. This has been vital in actually gaining the support of other credible experts and organizations in my efforts. 2, opening up avenues for opportunities and involvement. It's so important to have educational opportunities for youth and young professionals to expand their knowledge on nuclear disarmament through universities, international organizations, civil society experts, government officials, and community programs. Youth and young professionals also need to gather their courage and contact other experts and organizations for learning and professional opportunities. These can include internships, fellowships, workshops, conferences, and courses that can help them contribute through best practices. Simultaneously, experienced professionals and elders need to make it a point to provide opportunities for younger generations to participate and gain direct experience. Through the passing on of knowledge to the youth, we become one step closer to achieving a world free of nuclear weapons. Point 3, partnerships and collaboration. For young professionals that are already working within organizations or NGOs, but might serve a different purpose, it is worthwhile to see if there are any interlinkages that can open up pathways for partnership. For organizations that focus on the broader peace movement, this may not require a lot of critical thinking. However, others that focus more on climate action, for example, have highlighted interlinkages between climate change and nuclear disarmament, and they have been able to further build collaboration to support both subject causes. Through innovative collaboration and partnership with other credible and established organizations, greater public awareness can be generated on how nuclear disarmament can impact other humanitarian work and human life across all generations. Additionally, I recommend that you join the Pathways to Peace newsletter to be notified of upcoming opportunities on how you can participate and get involved. I just want to take this moment to thank everyone who is here with us, and to my fellow distinguished panelists, and to PTP. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renor. We have always said that Renor is our sage. And so I just so appreciate your wisdom, your knowledge, and really your tips about what we need to consider when we're bringing together folks in an intergenerational approach. So thank you for being you and being us. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Marilyn King, who is a 2-time Olympian in the 5-event pentathlon. And her talk today is on passing the baton the Olympian way. Marilyn has taught us a lot about Olympian thinking, and her positive approach to engaging across generations is just always welcome. So Marilyn, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tezekiah. And I want to begin by just expressing my deep gratitude to Pathways to Peace. I had an extraordinary experience, a life-altering experience in my first Olympic team. And I was in the Olympic Village and looking around and seeing these highly competitive people representing every race and religion and political persuasion. Some of them countries were at war with each other, but we lived in peace in the Olympic Village. And I thought, wow, if people, how could this be? And I saw that I had respect. Everyone you walked around, you had respect for, and you were curious about what their story was. And I thought, we could live in a global Olympic Village if people just walked around with respect and curiosity. But I felt so alone as I started to try to talk about this. Until 1984, I was invited to be a presenter at one of the first Peace Day programs, happened in San Francisco. And I found Pathways to Peace, and I found what felt like my tribe. So I really want to thank Pathways to Peace for embracing me, and also for showing me about the intergenerational approach and how important it is. And what I found really interesting initially as I started to embark on my work was I found that people of my age, people who were peers and maybe considered elders at this point, that many of them were fading off into the sunset, that they had something of value, but they felt like people weren't listening and young people didn't care. And I felt like, no, we need you. We need your wisdom. And I kind of saw it, this is a relay baton. And the relay baton has high value as it gets passed from runner to runner. And my friend Kent is a really good example. He spent over 40 years working with relief agencies across Southern Africa. And everything from being out way in the bush where they dropped him off from an airplane and would come back a week later to pick him up, to assisting across 3 or 4 countries in Southern Africa around initiatives. So his knowledge and experience around systemic change, I said, Kent, you can't just fade off into the sunset. And so his mantra now is, I'm not done yet. And looking for ways to pass what he has of value on to the next generation or to those who are interested. So for me, it's been very clear what I have of value because of my experience. And on this next slide is just a summary of what I call Olympian technology, which is a way to understand and demystify how is it that ordinary people like me do extraordinary things. And what I discovered was that it's really in each and every one of us, that we all have things that we are passionate about. And we sometimes think really effectively about that and move into action. And when we are passion powered, guided by an effective vision, and have really strategic daily practices with feedback so that we can adjust, our approach, is when we have the opportunity to achieve things at the highest level. And what this slide indicates is that when we have two out of those 3 things, it's really not that effective. Because if you don't have action, you're just a dreamer. If you don't think effectively, you could be a workaholic. And if there's no passion in the system, there's really not a lot of energy, but you can be moderately successful. So I knew that I had something of value to pass on, but then how do you do that? Who is interested in that? And how do you actually effectively pass the baton, perhaps, to the next generation? So how do we make things that are very complex, like peace, available to people so that they can make it actionable? So on the next slide, again, I'm really grateful to Pathways to Peace. and the decades worth of work through international organizations, including the United Nations, and participating and convening summits on everything from the rights of the child to maternal health, to ending hunger, to making water available. And this slide is one of those ways that we can take something very complex, like how do we think about peace, and put it into one image that allows us to access it in very effective ways. So around the outer ring of the planet here are the different components that are now part of the peace card and are the underpinnings for a way to think about peace. So how do we think about governance? How do we think about science and technology? How do we think about, culture and all of the elements? Well, each and every one of them, it becomes actually really important to know what is the history of this. And it's one of the things I feel is really important as elders that we bring to young people, is that you get a much larger picture of where we come from, where we are, and where we're going. So I'm going to use an example. If we use governance on this slide, there's a goal statement that you can actually find, and I'm pretty sure it's on the Pathways to Peace website. And I call it a goal statement. And with governance, it says that governments respect the human rights of all their citizens and settle disputes by the rule of law for the common good. Well, that's a wonderful goal statement, but if you didn't really know that a couple of 100 years ago, there were very few democracies. And we call democracy fully informed participatory democracy. So where do we come from? And if you could see the enormous and speedy increase in both emerging, immature, and mature democracies, you would be much more inspired about that. And we need to know what's going on presently so that we know who's doing what and how we can become involved. So for me, on the next slide, when I asked the question, what am I passionate about? And it was peace, I realized that there is content here. This slide looks very busy and is not important to dive into. But in the upper right-hand corner at 1 o'clock, there is what I call a thrival kit. So there's content. And then we have Olympians who can be the messengers as to how we can think about peace. And moving around the clock, we have implementation teams available to us. People in the community want to live in peace. So how can they participate in moving this along? And for me, we'll be using, taking from young people what we now understand about the capabilities of technology and things like what we're participating in today. And then on the International Day of Peace, to provide a report card for where we are and what you can do. So I'd like to close with the image of the peace card and to do what I call a 10-day challenge to begin your day the Olympian way. So reading this card, when you say, imagine a world that looks like this, when you shift and say, I want to live in a world like this. It's not just something out there that would be nice. I care about this. And then when you say, I intend to live in a world that looks like this, my invitation is that you choose one thing. And then for 10 days, say something like, I intend to live in a world where governments respect the human rights of all their citizens and settle disputes by the rule of law for the common good. And you will begin to have new thoughts that lead to new behaviors and participation in what I call the global Olympian thinking peace team. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Your wisdom is just amazing, and another call to action in a very different way. Thank you. Thank you. And I am going to just round out our presentation, and then we're turning it over to all of you to have questions for our presenters or thoughts or comments you'd like to share. I'm going to speak just a little bit to piggyback on some of the information that's been given about working cross-generationally. And this is really about all hands on deck. Because from my perspective, wisdom isn't measured by years. While it's different, it's still wisdom, regardless of the source. And one of the great pleasures for me of doing this work at Pathways to Peace is that I constantly get to learn about the wisdom that comes from elders, the wisdom that comes from youth, as well as those in the middle. And so I would begin by saying that what's important, most important about working across generations is really embodying the value that of equity. And equity isn't about everyone being equal. And certainly everyone is, but often not by societal status and standards. But everyone with equity, everyone should have an equal voice. And recognizing and making sure that we provide the opportunity. It's kind of like if those in the middle, if you don't know the thinking of those in the middle, you haven't been listening. But if you don't know the wisdom of those elders or those youth, you haven't been asking. And so it is about opening up the opportunity for that wisdom to surface. And as an organization, Pathways to Peace is committed to using the enormous privilege that we have to provide a platform for voices to be heard, voices that, excuse me, voices that historically or currently have been unable to be heard by those who need to hear them. And from our perspective, those voices are valuable and needed if we're going to come together to solve some enormous problems in our world today. So again, just that all hands on deck are needed. And it's important to recognize when we talk about both elders and youth, that my assumption always is if we open up the opportunity to get the wisdom coming forth and surfacing from elders and youth, because in many cultures today they are marginalized, then those in the middle are taken care of. So as we think about our programming and we think about putting our groups together, that we think before we even do it about integrating elders and youth into everything that we do. So again, I think that we begin with that assumption. I've found that it's really helpful to have inherent curiosity and to really want to hear what others have to say, and to be open to constantly learning. And so setting aside judgment and instead be open to listening and truly hearing. So here are just some kind of underlying tips to piggyback on what everyone else has so eloquently stated. And so first of all, check your biases when you're working across generations. What are your biases about elders and youth? We all know them. It's learned behavior. We all got them growing up in our society, our mainstream society. Remembering that not all cultures have those biases, but often in the ways that we do our work, those biases exist. So again, checking those, monitoring those, so they don't get in the way of intergenerational engagement. and manage the positional power differentials. This is something that I think we know, but is really hard to describe. But because, for example, we know that if Mia is going to come into a group of professionals, that can be really intimidating. And so instead of ignoring that what we know, instead opening up opportunities to engage her and to ask for the wisdom that she has. And oh my goodness, when we do that, it's powerful because we get information that we would never get from those who are currently deemed the professionals or those who are frequently coming together to make decisions. So when you think about youth and elders often being marginalized, the same positional differential exists with other marginalized communities. So it's really helpful to practice your diversity, equity, and inclusion skills when you're working across cultures, but also across generations, because each of us bring in not only our generational perspective, but our racial, cultural, ethnic perspective, and a whole lot of subcultures that make up who we are. So if we commit to inclusion, it means committing to experiences that can really allow all of those differences to surface and be of value. If all of us can put our best thinking, our best experiences on the table, we are going to come up with different solutions, the solutions we need to come up with, again, to solve the problems challenging us today. So honor and value those differences. Don't just tolerate them. Again, it's really about valuing those. And if at your very heart you can embrace that, that will play out in your behavior. And then recognize that it's not going to be business as usual, in that there are different communication styles generationally, different ways of doing things, different communication tools, and be open and expand thinking to accommodate the best of all of those. And recognize that we come to commonality through our diversity. So instead of moving to consensus immediately, ignoring the diversity of thought, opinions, practices, instead honor that diversity and then bring that forward to establish our commonality and our ability to make decisions that encompass and accommodate our diversity. And then bring youth and elders in at the beginning. This came from Renor when we were doing some intergenerational and international work. And so it's so important. What we talk about at Pathways to Peace is integration. And that means that whenever we're considering a project, that we're bringing everyone in at the beginning, including our youth and elders, instead of having a youth committee or looking at it as an afterthought. We already have the plan, now we bring in the youth. And so think integration in your intergenerational work. And then clear and direct communication that keeps everyone equally informed. I think that so often what I've seen happen, and we try to avoid, is that those who are kind of in leadership positions come together and make decisions and talk about things and sometimes not even making decisions, but between them share information, leaving out the rest of the group that's going to be engaged. And that puts those in a marginalized position. And so again, making sure that everyone has equal access to information. Information is power. So equal access to that information means that everyone can be engaged, and the process is not only intergenerational, but equitable for all involved. So those are just a few thoughts to add to the mix as we round down our time with you. And so I would leave you with these questions as food for thought. And if you feel so inspired, you can respond to them in the chat or raise your hand. And we'll have Katie call on you. Thank you, Katie. But what are the opportunities, challenges, or barriers to working across generations? We believe that everyone on this call, on this meeting, on this presentation, everyone who's come in has wisdom to share about this topic. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about what it is that has worked for you, what the barriers are, and what you would like to know. And then based on your experience, what advice would you give to others about how to work successfully across generations? So now it's your turn. So we would love, all of the speakers, including myself, would love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions. Put them in the chat, raise your hand. We'll give you some time to think. Which is, by the way, another good tip is to not get so nervous by the silence that you have to fill it in. You might miss some of the wisdom.
I'll start it off.
Good.
So this is for all the panelists. What is the one thing that you found to be the hardest about working intergenerationally?
Who'd like to go first?
Well, I would say that one of the things that I've encountered that I find really challenging is something you alluded to, Tez, which has to do with our internal and sometimes unrecognized biases. That sitting there, it's, as you said, it's like, wow, nobody really listens to me because I've got gray hair, or whatever that might be. And on both ends of the spectrum, the elders, my peers who were sitting there with a certain kind of, yeah, we've been here before and nobody listens or no one cares. And then, young people thinking their own version of the same thing. It's like, oh, they think I don't know anything. So addressing those, kind of innate biases and putting those kinds of things on the table and shining a light on them so that we can dispel those shadows and move into the light.
Thank you, Marilyn. Renor looks like he's going to come in. Renor?
I thank you, Katie, for the question. And also I really appreciate what Marilyn has just shared. I will also say, I think beginning stages of collaboration and working together and feel sometimes like the wheels are not moving fast enough. But when those relations begin, it's so important to take time to establish them. And I also think that it requires just a pinch of courage and not, and to have that sense of humility, you know, to be humble and not waiting, not waiting for the other person, regardless of their generation, to be the first to contact you or to, you know, to say hello. Sometimes, and I always say to my fellow peers in my age group, you have to be willing to be the first to knock on that door or to offer your hand or to say hello, you know, if it is not offered to you. And that requires courage. It also requires a pinch of being humble, having that humility, and that will help open up those pathways, part of it, at least in the beginning. So to answer the question, I think it's just a matter of, you know, kind of bringing it all together and building those relations, which takes time and patience and being mindful.
Thank you, Renor. I'm going to pick up on something that Renor said, and from an elder perspective, I think that what I've found is time is one of the biggest challenges, and recognizing that all the generations have a different kind of norm around time, and really gathering, because it takes a lot to get everyone in the same room. And when we do get everyone in the same room, it always feels like people are coming and going. And it also feels like even time in terms of listening. You know, when elders speak, that I know oftentimes, because I feel it myself, that there's a sense that they should hurry up in conveying their wisdom. When young people speak, I think the time comes in around when we're in those gatherings that we need to stop and ask, you know, if our youth have anything they'd like to add to the conversation, which slows down kind of the being on a roll and business as usual. So I think time is sometimes the greatest barrier. And I would love it if that wasn't true. And I can't say I've come up with any great ways to manage it, because it's not, I mean, in terms of engaging our youth, long meetings are not typically, I found, especially our younger youth, are not going to work very well. They're very busy. And so they have other things to do. And for our elders, that they need more time in the context of sharing wisdom and in relationship building. So I would just reinforce from my own perspective what Renor said, everything, and what Marilyn said as well about kind of naming and then being able to monitor our biases, is that time and relationship building are key challenges. And even how we build relationship. Is it face-to-face, or are we doing it over Snapchat or WhatsApp or other kinds of communication tools? Do we use that to build those tools to build relationship versus face-to-face? So that's what I would add. Others?
Yes, it's such a relevant question when it comes to time, Tezekiah. I agree with you and with all the other panelists, because one of the greatest challenges for me is, whether it's via social media or or just being able to identify with youth, irrespective of one's outlook on life. We are in different generations, and I find it becomes challenging to almost convincingly convey to someone younger what the future would look like in terms of putting themselves in my shoes, in the shoes of my mom, or in the shoes of my daughter. And so that empathy at some point, we lose them, because even though we were all young at some point or at that very same age, we did things differently. And so I go back to what you mentioned, where even though we have diversity, even though we're different age groups, it's about finding that commonality, that spark, that same frequency, that same energetic level, where you connect with each other irrespective of the age group. And that does come with spending time, extending a hand, as Renaud says, and relationship building to Tezekai. I totally agree with that. And the beauty of it is when that empathy and connection happens, we do feel like we're in this capsule of oneness and on one globe, and the generations fall away. But it does become tricky to do, yes.
So, Katie, maybe we could turn it back to you, because you certainly have done your share of cross-generational organizing. So
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I'll say from a marketing standpoint, since, with Pathways, I currently do most of social media. I found it's difficult to hit every target of every demographic of all ages, because we're not all on the same place. It tends to be now that older people are on Facebook, whereas, millennials as myself are on Instagram. And then, the Gen Zers tend to be on TikTok. So it's even hard via social media just to get us all into one place. So it's hard to recruit. It's hard to, get everybody just in the same spot to really discuss and to learn about, our organization even.
Yes. And Mia, I'd love to hear what you have to say and add.
Personally, I feel the hardest thing for me is that we're always separated into groups. For some reason, everyone has like this mindset that it's me against them. But I think if we could come to a general consensus of respect, we could go a lot farther. And I think there would be so much power in working together and seeing that everyone has the right to an opinion and to share their knowledge.
I love that. Do you find, Mia, that oftentimes you're in groups where you're not asked what you think?
Yeah, I mean, even when like things like this, when a younger person is speaking, they may think that they may be naive, or the things that they're saying isn't true because no, they don't have as much wisdom as opposed to someone else. But I think that just in the time of age that we're in now, from young, many people are exposed to different types of things and experiences that kind of fuels the need for them to speak up and share their voices.
Yes. And you're a clear example of that, Mia. We need your voice and the voice of other young peace builders. Yes, we need it now, not for the future, because as Avon said, we will have no future unless we come up with some solutions now, and that we need all voices, all perspectives to be able to come up with solutions that will work and will be sustainable. So would you have anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. Thank you, though.
Thank you. It's at this point that I would like to ask our presenters for any final remarks. Who would like to go first?
I'd like to pick up on something that Natasha said and share something that I think is an example of what we've all been talking about and pointing to here about, how do we do this bridge? And as an elder person, believe it or not, I'm on TikTok and I found Jerusalem, and, raise your hand. This is one of those places where a DJ from South Africa had something coming through him in a beat that he felt was deeply spiritual. His sister picked up a line from an ancient religious text and turned it into the song to go with the beat. And now all over the world, we have people of all ages with all kinds of differences, all singing the same song and dancing the same dance and challenging one another. And so here we have an experience of exactly what we're talking about. Here is a way that something struck a chord in people around the world and communicated a deep joy and love of music and dancing, and something that crosses all kinds of boundaries, including intergenerational. So as an elder, thank you, TikTok, and thank you, music and dance, for helping me find a way that we can easily communicate a message that speaks to people.
Perfect. Renor, would you have any closing remarks?
Thank you.
And of course,
Thank you to everyone who has shared their perspectives. It's really been amazing. And I think that this conversation has just been enriched even more. And it's so nice to see all of us interacting on a deeper level, discussing a little bit more in depth. I do believe that these conversations need to be happening in other communities, all communities, all backgrounds. So regardless of who is opening up that conversation or who is working to gather folks together, I don't think that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is that they happen and that there's opportunities for them. And so I'm so grateful to you, Avon, and Hezekiah, to all the panelists who have, come together and have provided this opportunity for everyone to share their perspective. And I will also say that to the youth and young professionals and others younger than me or near my age group, I think it's so important to also build a sense of competency. I think that when older generations, elders, see that you are serious, that you are committed, that you are dedicated, that you're relentless, consistent, they naturally may want to help or support you in your efforts or learn more about your efforts. This is so important, to have that sense of consistency. And that shows your integrity as a person. And people naturally will open up and want to support and be part of that. So, thank you, everyone.
thank you, Renor. Natasha?
Thanks, Hezekiah. It is a beautiful experience when we are able to not only share hints and tips and courses and principles on how to connect intergenerationally or as fellow human beings, but if we really take the time to be in each other's presence in a more quiet way, it overcomes so much. And I do believe if we take the time to honor each other, where we truly recognize each other and we encourage each other to be authentic, it would raise us to a new level of connection and communication. and transcend differences that we ourselves find that we have personally when we look inside. We're not at peace with ourselves, and we have differences because we're not authentic with ourselves. And as soon as we get to that place where we feel we can humbly just be who we are, no reservations, no concerns, no hang-ups, no feeling less, no lack. And that comes from just one other person being truly in your presence and honoring you. And if all of us can extend a hand to do that for someone else, the same way Pathways to Peace does. I've entered this group with my own unique background and ways of doing things. And there's such a huge platform and space of love and encouragement and invitation that I've witnessed. And if that can be generated to others around the world, that's precisely the kind of authentic reaching out and reconciliation that we have experienced firsthand in our country. And I wish that love and peace for all of us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Natasha. That is at the root of it all, isn't it? That love, that being heard, being seen. Thank you. And Mia, is there anything you'd like to add? Closing remarks?
I would just like to say thank you to everyone, to all the panelists. To Zekiah, thank you for putting this all together. I know how much hard work you put into this entire presentation and everything that went on today. And I just hope that the people that attended this leave with kind of a new insight on bridging the intergenerational approach, because if we decide to all work together, I think that we can all reach a new purposeful living that can really help in not only our lives but in our country. So thank you.
That's so important. So very important, Mia. Thank you so much. And thank you for your kind words. Even, I see you're still with us. Would you like to give some closing remarks?
Just so grateful to every single person who has just come forward with all that you want to share. Hopefully there's a lot more opportunities for this to happen. But for what Natasha was saying, is just being so authentic about who you are, what you were doing. And it really is about the love that underlies all of our differences that unites us. And that is our common purpose also for peace. And I think I'm touched by what everyone has said. And Hezekiah, I concur. I know all the late night work that has gone into making certain that the slides are in order and all of that. And to Katie for behind the scenes, making somehow all of this technologically work. And I just a deep bow to each one of you. And I'd like to pass my baton over to David, who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. And then I will begin to prepare us for the next round for the peace wave.
Well, thank you, Avon, and what a delight to be together and share in this way. And one of the things that comes to mind to me is right now we're doing, as Marilyn had demonstrated, passing the baton. The evolution of Pathways to Peace and the sustainability of Pathways to Peace is right here. You know, all of us together and with the young colleagues. And it's beautiful what we're doing, and I'm very grateful that this work, this focus lives on and will continue beyond us. Thank you. Namaste.
Yes. And Avon, you've raised your hand.
I had something to add, and then I would like to invite Monica to say anything she would like to say. But the intergenerational approach to peace building is the key for building a viable, regenerative culture of peace for the benefit of all. And it is that focus on unity and diversity. From diversity comes our unity, and from our unity is because of our diversity. And that is, again, a key to intergenerational peace building. Monica, is there anything you want to add?
I just want to send my deep appreciation. I put things in the chat. I can't tell you how much I personally appreciated having nuclear weapons discussed in this issue, and invite them to our room tomorrow from 1 to 2 for an intergenerational discussion on nuclear weapons. But most importantly, my deep appreciation to Pathways to Peace for the leadership and for always being a part of intergenerational activities. Thank you, Avon and David, who have been there for so long, and Tez, you've certainly brought this to a new level. So thank you. And to the youth of Pathways to Peace, thank you for your impressive work.
Thank you, Monica. So here we are at the close. And in some ways, it feels like it'd be wonderful to linger a little bit longer in the embrace of these presenters and these participants. So we close all of our presentations by reminding everyone that you are a pathway to peace. And we mean that from the depth of our heart, regardless of your age, regardless of your discipline, regardless of where you are at on your own pathway, you are a pathway to peace. So we honor you. Thank you for being here. We are blessed by your presence, and we look forward to working arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder, to create a world at peace. Thank you.